Third. Okay. Hi, Corky. Welcome.
Hi, thanks, Randy. It's fun to be here, and it's really always fun to work with your teachers. So greetings, everybody, and I'm going to try to show you a little something about how to set up your cellists so that they're comfortable and well set for any future goals they have, so that they're not developing any bad habits along the way, and you're setting them free to be as good as they want to be. So the first thing is to make sure that they've got something flat to sit on, a flat bottom chair. Frankly, I'm sitting on a piano bench. The piano benches work great. Anything, any kind of a stool or something, as long as they can just sit, because if you have a molded chair or a folding chair that lets the bottom slide backward and then the students are trying to sit upright, they're going to have this terrible arch in their back that's going to make them uncomfortable. They'll be squirming. They won't be happy campers. So try to be sure your cellists have a nice flat bottom chair to sit on. The other part of it is, and we'll get to it again, but getting the cello situated on them. It's really important that if they've got a regular chair that they sit on, that they also have a strap that's set to the right length so they can consistently set up well. This is especially important when they're getting started. So how to get the cello to the student. There's one point of contact that's extremely important. Of course, there's going to be your right leg will be on the bottom, the C-bout, the lower part of the cello right here. So the right leg will rest against that somewhere. But the important one that often gets neglected is this place right here, where the inside of the knee and the back corner, lower corner of the cello C-bout on the left side they need to come together, because that knee holds that cello in place. And in fact, if they're doing it well, they can do kind of a little cello dance where they can actually just use their knees and legs to manipulate the cello hands-free. What you don't want is for the knee to be back behind the cello, where the cello can slip around and it tends to be too far away from their neck, and when they shift, they'll be crashing into it. Plus, they're trying to support the cello and play at the same time. It never works out well. So that knee that has no other job except to hold that cello in place so that they can be using their hands and be completely free here.
Corky, you see a lot of kids who do that, like their knee is behind the cello, it's off to the side. Do you think that's because they want to see their left hand, or why do you think kids fall into that trap?
Yeah, frequently they do, and of course we are famous for putting tapes on the thing, so they want to see if they're playing in tune, and they turn around and they look at the tapes, and then they're watching their hands like this, so then the cello slides away. We talk more about that, and we will talk more about that later, about how to get the kids free from feeling like they have to stare at their hands. But this is where it belongs. And if you can't see your hand, well, that's frankly in first position. That's frankly just the way it is. When good cellists play, they don't look, they listen. But we can talk more about that later.
One thing that's cool about this, I have to say, and I know you're going to talk about this later, is on Zoom, kids can actually see themselves and see how centered they are. Like when we look at you holding the cello, it just looks beautifully symmetrical, and everything lines up beautifully, and they can actually see that on Zoom. Whether they like it or not is a different story, seeing themselves, but they can actually monitor this in a way that they can't necessarily do at home.
Exactly. Yeah, this is one of the great advantages of Zoom, is they really are seeing themselves as we want them to see themselves, so that they can be noticing that. And in fact, we'll talk about this later too, but the idea that they've got 3 ways of knowing how well they're doing. And a very important one is visual, but it's also how it feels, the kinesthetic part of it, and of course how it sounds, the oral part of it, whether or not the sounds are coming out the way they should. So and also just for an FYI, the cello needs to come to the chest. Mid-chest is a good idea right here. And the scroll is basically, and peg box is basically behind the head when it's set up well. If you find a kid who's kind of looking more like this, and the peg box is near their face, or the peg are sticking there to their neck, that it's either the end pin's not out far enough, or the cello might be too small for them if they've got the end pin out and their knees are in the right place, and then it's like this, then the cello's probably, they need a larger size cello. And one other thing that I think we're going to talk about later, but that idea of bringing the cello in close enough that they can get their arms around it so that it's right there, because you want everything to be easy.
Cool.
Yeah.
And then we're going to talk a lot about the bow hand. I know there's something you'd like to say first about that, just about like the roles of the fingers.
Yeah, well, when it comes to the bow hand, it's so important when you're working on getting it set up to make sure that they're supporting the bow with the left hand, or that the bow is sitting on the cello. This is really the better way to do it, just because once it's on the cello, then there's other things that tend to start happening. So when they're learning this is really important that they hold on to the bow with the left hand. But once you're getting the bow hand set, you'll see that the students have a tendency to do this kind of thing, or they'll do this kind of thing. These are both there. They basically are doing the same thing, which is supporting all the weight out here. Cello bows are heavier than violin bows, and we don't have the cello holding up when you play violin, you've got the bow just resting on the strings, which is great. Then you don't need all of this activity here. But the cellists, and probably bassists too, they will do this sort of slump hand just to be supporting this. So it's not that there's something, what's the matter with cello bow hands and young cellists. It really has to do, they're trying to hold up the bow. So hold it here. Make sure when the bow hand gets set, which we'll talk about in a while, that's there. Here's actually how you support the cello bow from sliding off the string. It's not from doing this, although you see lots of kids doing that. What you want to do is teach them how to use their index finger to support the weight of the tip, because the bow's going to slip down this way. What you want them to be able to do is use their first finger to curve and pull up the tip, or let the tip drop. And then of course we're looking for that place right in the middle. I'm doing this all without touching the cello. You can actually do it right on the string. It makes a kind of a crunchy noise. We call this the crane operator, where the crane goes down and then the crane gets lifted up. But that's done by, you can see I'm not even touching my pinky to the stick. This is just being done by how curved my first finger is. Yeah.
So that's really a fine motor skill, just with their index finger, or just getting them used to the role of the index finger.
Yeah, this is one of the things that's really, really challenging about learning to play an instrument. You're using all of your phalanges in your wrist and your hand and all these joints all in different ways than what typical ways we use them. So
do you recommend the first few times kids are actually working with a bow, just to put the instrument down and just work with the bow? I mean, I know you were saying hold it with your left hand to practice the stuff that
with the left hand helping. Absolutely, with left hand helping, you don't need the cello at all. Just don't let them try to set up their bow without some kind of support out here, because they start developing all kinds of bad habits this way. It's not that we never ever use the pinky, but what you want to do is have them not be dependent on the pinky. You don't want, yes, there'll be times when we have to play extra soft. In fact, it's sort of a well-known fact that when you're playing an orchestra and you have an extended, very soft playing, that's actually more exhausting, because you're having to lift the bow away from the string a little bit than when you're playing loud. Loud is actually easy to do. You just apply your arm weight and you just do this, right? You're sawing away. But it's usually the soft stuff that makes cellists exhausted, because we are having to support more of the weight of the bow. So for just a good basic sound, using arm weight and everything should be easy and comfortable for the students. They shouldn't be pressing. They should just be using their arm weight. There's ways of helping the students find what that means to use arm weight by hanging their hand. Again, I'm just supporting the bow with the left hand. But you know, to do this sort of thing where they're feeling their arm weight just pulling down, and you can gradually ease that back into a bow hand as they get more comfortable with what that feels like. So that arm weight thing, and then of course it applies right to the cello. Seemed like there was one other thing I was going to talk about, but anyway, any of the strokes and things that we do, sometimes I do a kind of a flicking thing to make sure that they're not bracing their hand. You can do these kind of limp flicks and still hold the bow as long as you're supporting out here. I usually use a loop here so that the bow can move.
It seems like it's always like flexibility is the biggest obstacle, because kids are grabbing and feeling like they're gonna, if they don't grip or hold, or that's where the bad habits start. And so much of good cello and violin viola teaching is teaching to be loose and flexible, and to trust the instrument and trust the bow, and trust that all the parts of your body that are working most efficiently.
Right. Well, you know, you think about the students who are, or young kids who are given a pencil for the first time, and usually they're kind of sad because they're not used to holding something like that. And, you know, the immediate tendency is just to clutch. And of course, this is a really odd object. This is a bow, a violin or cello bow is a very strange tool. And so you know, and they're afraid they're going to break it. It's skinny, you know. Of course, fortunately most of the student bows are fiberglass these days, so that they're not so likely to break. But they're afraid they're going to drop it, and they're not, and they might drop it. In fact, when I'm working with my students and I'm trying to get them to hold the bow loosely, and they say afraid they're going to drop the bow, it's like, well, you put a pillow there, or I tell them if they drop their bow and they break it, I'll pay for a new bow. If they do it because they're so loose that they drop their bow, I'll pay them for a new bow. You know.
That's great.
So yeah, you're looking for freedom, you're looking for movement, you're looking for flexibility, all of that stuff. So
all of which translates to sound eventually. So hopefully when we have you back, we'll talk about sound in particular. I know we're going to talk about contact point and just how so much about the right hand influences just the kind of sound that kids get, and the kind of sound they get influences whether they want to continue or not, because that's really what playing an instrument is. It's all about the sound.
Make great sounding sounds, yeah, make beautiful music. So
yeah, cool. Well, let's talk more about the bow hand, and that was cool. Thanks. And I'm gonna
on the pad, it's the inside corner right by the nail. That's what touches the thumb, and then the fingers come to the other part of the stick, so that you end up looking more like that. Yes, the students will look more like that, and of course they're still supporting with their left hand.
Yeah, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
So when you're doing that, is the other side of your thumb actually touching the ferrule? Or am I curving?
No,
am I supporting it too sideways?
Because you're still going to have a bit of a sloped angle. You're not going to be down that low.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you.
Like that. Yeah. Okay. And then if you need to, this sometimes is helpful. Let's see. I'll grab a pen here. Sometimes it's helpful to take your student's hand and starting with a line right across the crease of the first finger, right in there, not down here, not up here. That's where the bow is going to touch first, and then basically it just comes across straight across this way. It's not working. Kind of like that. All right. So the first finger, that crease goes right on top of the stick. You could, if you've got an octagonal stick, you can almost feel how it sort of nestles in to one of those angles of the frog. And then the second finger, usually it's touching down here on the ferrule, but that means it's up here on the stick, about where that line was. And then the third finger is someplace on the frog. Fourth finger does not go on the tip. I mean, on the top of the stick, it's down here. Okay, again, this is the kind of position we want for the bow hand. We don't want it, you know, like that, right? So supporting here, and then that's the way that works. Now, I so naturally do the pronating of my hand. I just sort of do that naturally. But students will still often kind of be, you know, it'll look more like that, even if they've got the fingers right. So here's the next trick, is getting them to pronate without twisting their hand all around. And I have two ways of doing it. Here's one way. We've got two bones in our arm, our forearm. One's on the outside and one's on the inside. This one is usually the one that sits on top, you know, when we're just sitting normally, like resting our arms or whatever. This inside one's usually up above. We want to turn it around so this outer one is above. Okay, so if you can get it doesn't have to be a lot, it's just a little bit, but it needs to be rotated so that your outer bone is above the level of the inner bone. Okay, the other way I do it, and this of course is when they're starting to play, is I actually draw. I'm going to be all marked up. I'm not very good at doing this on my own hand.
You look like one of your students.
Huh?
You look like one of your own students.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, these are really ugly eyeballs, but those are eyeballs. And I tell the students that the eyeballs on their top of their hand have to be looking at where the contact point is. Okay, so everybody gets eyeballs on those first two knuckles. And then if the eyeballs are staring up into space and not paying attention, they're not doing it right. The eyeballs have to be looking at the contact spot out on the cello. Okay, so that's one way to get it. Now, of course, you're going to have some students that really twist and everything. That you can hold the bow and still get, because all you need is that little subtle rotation. Really, that's all you need. What you're trying to do, if you think of the thumb as being the fulcrum, you're trying to of a scale. You're trying not to do this, pushing on this side and lifting the bow away. You're trying to get the weight of the arm over onto the stick and onto the hair where it's touching the cello. I had a little thought that glanced by, and the farther out you go on the stick, the more pronated we tend to be, because we need that rotation. We need that rotation to be able to get a good contact at the tip. Okay. Okay. So any questions about that? Does that seem okay? Okay. I didn't hear anything, and I can't see everybody. Unfortunately, I wish I could. Anyway. Okay. So
sorry, I have a quick question. When you tell the kids, do you tell them their outer bone, or do you like the pinky side? What do you tell the kids? Because you said to lift the pinky side, the outer side of the hand in. Is there a language that you use?
No, if you have your arm flat, there's a bone that's on the inside of your arm, and there's a bone that's on the outside. So I usually could just call it the outer bone, but any way it communicates. If the students think of it a different way, you know, then I use their language. You know, I always make sure that it communicates to them. I'm not just trying to force my language on them. So, yeah. Okay. So now, here, before we even pick up the cello again, here's the next thing. We want all of these joints that we have in our fingers, our wrist, our elbow, and our shoulder. All of these joints need to be able to operate easily, without tension, and independent of one another. Most of the time when we use our arms and hands, we're using them like all together. Like we want to pick up a bunch of dishes to take up to the table, we kind of go like this, and we use everything together. When you play stringed instruments, and I know most of you are stringed instrument players, not everybody, but you are going to use your hands and arms very differently from just normal life. And so that's one of the harder things about cello playing, is to use the hands in a different way, and the wrist in a different way, and the elbow differently. You know, where we loosen some muscles and actively use other muscles that it doesn't usually work that way. Okay. So one of the things that tends to be difficult, especially if students are clutching their bow grip desperately, you know, like they've got tight thumb, they got this, is they can't move their fingers. And when they can't move their fingers, it's really, everything else tends to lock up. If you do it right now for yourself, you just like squeeze the stick, or let's just brace your fingers. Now, can you feel all of that tension radiating up your arm? Like your elbows tight, everything's tight, right? So we're trying to teach them how to do, you know, loosen up things, make things move. You can't be tight and move at the same time, not easily anyway. So here's one of the things that I have students do. And this isn't, I think it's easy, but of course I've been doing it for a while. So this is what I call the cliff and the plateau. This is the plateau where my arm right through my wrist and my upper part of my hand, right out to these, my first knuckles, those guys, creates a plateau. And then I take my fingers and I stick them straight down. So now it's creating a cliff. And depending upon how old your kids are, you know, I sometimes go, you know, that sort of thing, right? And then here's the plateau where they can stop in time and not fall off the cliff. And here's the cliff where you, okay. So just going up and down that, hey, you guys are good. Try not to do the wrist. A lot of students do the wrist because it's really hard to keep that still, but this is part of the deal. You know, you're trying to get them to move their fingers independently of the wrist. Okay, good. All right. So the wrist usually is not a problem. Students can do the wrist real easily. The elbow thing, I think you guys have all seen students playing like this, right? The beginner students, they kind of saw away and then this gets locked up in here. So we want them to have a nice free forearm and elbow. So my approach to that is to talk about being a marionette, okay? So the marionette, we're the marionettes and we're gonna have 3 strings we're working with. One is the top of the head, that just gets them sitting up straight in their chair. And then we have a, put my bow down. We have a string on the back of our elbow and we have another one on the top of our wrist, okay? So your marionette has pulled your string up here, so you're sitting up nice and straight, but still loose, not rigid, just hanging there because you're just made of wire and wood. Okay, now we're gonna have the puppeteer pull the elbow string up so that the elbow's just pulled up. There's no tension in the shoulder. Some of us older folks can feel the shoulder a bit more than we like to, but the hand is just sort of hanging there, right? And you can even do this, you know, like, how loose are you? Yeah. Okay. All right. So if you got that movement, then what you're going to do is have your puppeteer raise your wrist string so that it's up just probably a little, still hanging down a little bit. And now we're going to swing it back and forth here. Again, same swing, just with the wrist elevated a little. Okay, this is like one of the biggest, most important strokes a student can learn right here. You know what stroke I'm talking about?
Détaché.
There we go, détaché. This is the détaché stroke. They will use this, I won't say most of the time, but regularly, like every day we play détaché. So this is actually one of the easiest strokes to teach if they can get used to doing this. All right. And of course, they've got to get used to doing that, holding the bow, all that stuff, which of course complicates it. But that's what we're going to do now. We're going to pick up cellos.
I'm just going to jump in really quick. One of the things that I've been thinking about, and this is for all of you guys, is something that Deanna brought up last week or 2 weeks ago, and that is this autotelic idea where kids learn to know whether they're doing it right or not. And I'm thinking, as Corky's teaching these things, I mean, our art form in teaching instrumental music is very like teacher dependent, right? Kids don't generally traditionally learn to solve their own problems or to be aware of these things, but there's no reason why from the beginning we can't start training them with certain questions, right? And then I've heard Corky, she asks a lot of questions like, how's your elbow? Talk about your, how's it, you know, so that they learn what questions to be asking themselves and not see their technique as just something that some grown-up always is fixing. I'm also thinking, what a great opportunity to get kids interested by showing up one day with a marionette. If you would like a marionette, I will purchase one. You guys can share it, just because I think that would just so enliven a Zoom, right? If you just actually had a marionette for 5 minutes, every kid is watching.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Because some of those kids, a lot of kids have not seen anything like that necessarily. We probably all did at some point in our lives, but and Randy must have read the end of my handout, because what he just said. I always say there's 3 ways. There should always be 3 ways for students to verify what they're doing and that they're doing well. And that is that they should be able to see it, and they should be able to feel it, and they should be able to hear it. Now, of course, all the things we've done today so far are silent, because we haven't made any sounds on the instrument. But you know, going forward from now on, that the sound will also be included in it. And I imagine if you were really creative, you could probably come up with some sort of a sound, literally a sound that would go with, you know, some sort of a whooshy sound or something. You could really come up with some things that would help anchor these movements with the students. In the cliff plateau thing, you know, well, you heard me do the little, you know, it doesn't really matter what it is, as long as the students can anchor what they're learning into something that they can turn around and translate themselves. And if you can get them all to go, ooh, you know, then you've done something, because now they know what they're looking for. Yeah. Okay. All right. So anyway, back to the détaché stroke. Here's the biggest problem with when students go, oh, now I know how to do this stroke. And then this is what happens. They want to do the arm swing. And so then they put the bow at the frog, and then they try to do the forearm swing, and it ends up doing that, because this stroke does not work at the frog. It just simply does not. And I'll show you why. You're attached here at the elbow. So that means that when your arm, the path of your hand is this way. It's in an arc. It is not a straight line. Okay. And the only place that we can even pretend that it's a straight line is when it's here. And we use that bit right there. But as you can see, I'm not really close to the cello here. If I was close to the cello, it'd be going up and down the string here, right? So we want it out here in a way, which means that this is going to be balance point-ish, middle-ish, so that we're using that bottom part of that curve that's almost, it's like a bottom part of a circle that's almost going just straight back and forth. And that's what we're utilizing. So if they're learning détaché and they put their bow here, there's going to be a problem. They won't work. In fact, I had a student just recently tell me how bad my plan was, because it wasn't helping him.
Hey guys.
Because he was doing it here.
Hey guys, could you not chat right now, because it's getting right in the way of her picture. Thanks.
Okay, so if anybody's got a cello there and wants to try this swinging arm, you can always do this first. Notice I'm holding the bow here, and then you don't want the students to try to do it up here. You'll see they start pushing with their pinky. You know, as tempting as it is to say, oh sure, do it silently up here. Don't do that. If you're going to do it above the cello, make a little loop with the left hand fingers so that it can slide back and forth, and then they can do this so that they're not trying to hold up the bow at the same time, right? And you don't have to go like this. You can just leave that there and just let it slide, because all you're trying to do is teach yourself the right arm movement. Yeah, that makes sense. And then you put that back on the cello, and of course you need, because you're out away from where your hand weight is going. If I was not pronating, you end up with a sound like that, which is out of focus. So we want that little bit of pronating, is that bone on the outside up a little higher than the inside one. Are the eyeballs on your hand watching the contact spot? If they are, now you're gonna get a better sound. Go ahead and try if you like.
Corky, I have another question.
Sure.
Where am I feeling the most pressure on my fingers when I'm holding the bow? Is it right, those lines that you drew? Or where's the pressure? Like, which fingers have the most?
First and second fingers really where the weight should be going, your arm weight. And that's why we try to talk about weight rather than pressure, because we want the arm arm to be relaxed and hanging down, and not the, not the tight thing that's trying to press into the, which ends up with the grindy sounds, right? There's actually a really nice thing you can do with arm weight, if there's a way to do it. Usually it needs to be with the teacher there or a parent who can push. But the idea is you take your arm, your bow arm, and you just drape your wrist over the top thing, and then pretend like your arm has gone to sleep, and then have somebody push and pull the bow back and forth. You'll find that if your arm is truly relaxed, you got way too much weight to work with. You got more than enough, probably double or triple what you need to even play the loudest sounds. So this is you want the students to have this relationship with the cello where they're feeling the weight going into the cello and not feeling like they're squeezing the stick and pressing the bow. Yeah. So they can feel this. I often talk about draping the fingers, and if they end up like putting their fingers, I don't know if I'm not close enough to it, but if they end up putting the fingers on top of the stick this way so they can feel the weight going down, that's okay. Then they can just go back to their wrap. But that feeling of feeling that weight going down rather than squeezing the stick and trying to push. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Okay, let's see. I'm sure I've left some things out. Let me just look at my notes here. I'm almost done. Oh yeah, okay. Oh yeah, all right. I have one right here. Let's see. So I don't know. I have a few other things that are really fun to do that that students really enjoy doing. Let me see if I can. Yeah, I've got one right here. Good. Forgot to get this out. So these cush balls are really dandy, and this I use for freedom. I actually learned this from a wonderful bass teacher. She's like probably one of the best bass teachers in the world, prep bass teachers. She teaches at Oberlin. Tracy Rowell. She's like spectacular. Anyway, she uses the cush ball to do a sidearm flick. So if I do this, the cush ball ends up over there. Cush balls are good because they're lightweight and they're fun to throw around, and they, well, if you aim them at something China, it's going to break, but generally speaking, it won't damage anything. So that feeling of just throwing kind of a sideways, but like putting it under there and doing kind of an underhand throw gives a nice feeling of freedom. So those cush balls, I mean, I got a whole bunch of them. Uh-oh, I can't even find it. Now I can't find it. It went out on the porch or something. I don't know where it went. Anyway, you can get bunches of those for pretty cheap, and so I just order them online, and then I've got a bunch of them to give my students. They like that little treasure. I have them throw it, and then I tell them at the end of the lesson they can keep it as long as they practice it. So that feeling of freedom really works really well. Of course, we want our students to eventually be able to open out, like do things right at the frog, where they're going to have to use more finger or they have to use shoulder. There's really not any way to open out the elbow when you're right at the frog. But opening everything out for a long legato or long, whole bow stroke. This is another challenge for students, and usually the biggest challenge has to do with the A string. But let's, just talking about the bow angles and the way the bow has to move and the way the bow arm has to move when you're on the C string. The bow hand is actually kind of going behind you. It's aiming this way. Otherwise, you're going to run into other strings. And then, of course, we've got the more the steadier path of the middle strings. But then when you get to the A string, I know you guys have all experienced that. This with the bow, the kids end up like this, right? So I've got a little trick. It's certainly easier if they're in the classroom. Are any of the kids in the classroom right now? None. Okay. Well, so they may or may not be able to do this. If they've got like a big art board or a whiteboard, I've got a whiteboard here. This is, usually the schools have whiteboards. But here's the way this works. And I hope I can show you this well enough give you if I pull this a little bit closer here. Yikes. Stay there. The stand is a little wobbly. So if you have a whiteboard and you draw a line, a straight line at kind of at your close to waist, whatever the student's waist is, then you stand at the whiteboard. You can actually create the movement for the bow, the track of the bow. So I'm going to stand here with my right hip sort of near this line, and I'm going to draw the line back and forth so that my arm has to stretch out this way. This is basically the path of the bow when I'm on the C string. If I face it a little bit more, this is like the G string. If I angle a little more, this is like being on the D string. And then by the time I'm on the A string, I'm noticing how much my arm has to stretch out in order to stay on that line, that I have to reach it forward. And that's really what happens when you're on the A string. The arm is almost straight out in front of you. It seems counterintuitive, but that's the truth. The path of the bow goes out this way. If you're going to draw a straight line out into the air, sometimes, you can use the bow, of course, as sort of a dowel, or you can get a dowel. But if you've got the bow set on the A string, and I know this is sort of a Suzuki thing, but if you're holding on tight, it's not easy to do. But if you're holding on tight to that A string, and then you slide the bow is perpendicular string, you can slide your arm this way, up and down, and this is the path of the bow here. Okay, so but it's sort of the straight line out in space, and the reason doesn't feel natural, of course, is because we're built for curves. We're always attached in one place. We aren't on a sliding thing. You do this, right? So the students have to get used to drawing that line out into space. And sometimes I'll put my face right there and I'll say aim for my nose or something, and then they'll hit the nose. They'll actually do it really well when I put my face right there. So,
best quote of the day: "We are built for curves." I'm gonna have a T-shirt.
Yeah. I will say one thing about teaching online like this is that the students actually are more aware of what they look like than any other time. When we're sitting in a classroom, an orchestra, they're really not aware of what they look like. But that is one advantage to doing Zoom teaching, is they actually see themselves in the camera and can actually see whether or not they're doing things well. And it's really, actually, that's something to really take advantage of while you can. I don't consider this the optimal way of teaching by a long shot, but that reflection that they can see what they're doing is really huge. It's really important. So take advantage of that. Make sure that they got lots of good visuals for knowing what they're supposed to look like.
I love that, because kids are always told, like, go home and watch yourself in the mirror, and they never do, right?
Never do.
No kid ever wants to watch themselves in the mirror practice, even though every voice teacher, string teacher, cello, whatever, always says do it. Now we've got forced mirrors, right? We should take advantage of it. Yeah, that's a really good point. I never thought of it.
Yep. Very good. Okay, so
can I answer a quick question? Sorry.
Please.
So I'm a violin player. That's my main thing. So my three issues when I go to the cello are: one, the string crossings are backwards. So when I get overwhelmed, I string cross the wrong way. And then the other thing is that, next thing is that the bow, we as violin players, we tilt the bow, we curve that hair into our thumb more. And you guys as cello players, you want that curve, but obviously it's backwards. The question I have is the sound point. As a violin player, I try to have my kids try to think about a bow width away from the bridge. That's a really good point that they can really pull into that point on their instrument. And I tend to I go too close to the bridge, I think. And do you have a good marking for like the optimal contact point? Because for violin, it kind of like goes into like bow widths.
Right. Yeah. It's, of course, we've got larger dimensions with the cello, and the string length is longer, so the vibrating length is expanded, right? So I usually just right in the middle between the end of the fingerboard and the bridge is a perfectly good place for them to establish that. That I'm glad you brought that up, because I didn't have that in my plan to talk. But the just looking at it is not going to help them do it. Of course, it's good to be able to look and say, yes, my bow is sitting right smack dab in between the end of the fingerboard and the bridge. But once they look away, do they know it's still there? And so this is, again, one of these things where you need to do it by sound. How does it sound? And by how does it feel? How does it feel to play at that level on the bridge? Of course, that consistent setup is really important. So that's why I say, get a strap, make sure that the end pin comes out the same length every time. But that to be able to say, yes, I believe I am right in playing right on the middle between the bridge and the fingerboard, and then have them look down and see how straight is their bow, how close are they to where they thought their target was, so that they can do that by feel and not just depend on when they're looking. So that, and then of course the sound is huge, and the ones that play way up here and they get a squash sound, it's because of course the string is trying to vibrate there, and the bow is in the way of the vibration, right? So, to be able to hear that the sound is much purer is also really huge. So they should be able to recognize it by sight and by feel and by sound. That's a huge one. So all three.
I have a question too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry, Levi, were you done? Did you have and so if people kind of go in, I hear my students kind of making fun of each other. Do you put your end pin strap on the left leg or the front leg, or the right or the left leg of the chair? Does it matter?
The left. It does matter.
Thank you.
Yeah. Do you understand? I don't know if anybody understands why that matters, but if you need, what you want is some resistance going in that direction. Because if you don't have any resistance, it would be like this. The cello just sort of slides away from you if it's on the wrong side. Well, you can try it out, try it out both ways, but having it on the left side is when it's going to do the most work in that cello dance. This thing, the kids are going to be like that if they've got the strap on the wrong side. It'll be slipping away from them. Okay.
And I have a question kind of along that line. So you talked about where to put the cello in terms of your knee, but what about how high do we want what about the angle and where it's going to fall on the student's body, and where does the scroll end up and the pegs, and do you have something?
Peg box should be right behind their head. They shouldn't feel a peg against their neck, but ideally the peg box goes right back behind their head. It should not be out and away. We're going to talk about left hand stuff and why that's really important. But they should be, should be easy for them to nestle that neck against their neck without running into the peg. So if they're like this, it could well be that they either need to pull the end pin out farther, or their cello is too small for them and they need a larger size cello. Did I answer all your questions? You said something else, and
Well, just sort of the angle. So how far should we let it?
Right. It should be resting. I mean, it should rest against their chest somewhere. And I don't know whether you're working with maturing females and stuff, but usually the breast thing is not a big deal. I know it's like a sensitive topic for everybody, but once in a while, but it's usually more mature people, like a woman with larger breasts and short legs. That's usually the hardest thing. They usually end up holding the cello more upright. But for you guys, it should not be an issue. They just pull it against their chest. It's sitting right there. I do encourage that to be. Sometimes they hold it like really far away from them, and so they have to really reach to get around the cello. The whole hug the cello thing that the Suzuki folks do, I'm sure you're aware of that. It's actually really good. Put your arms around it. Everything should feel like it's really immediate. It's all right here. It shouldn't feel like anything's far away. Putting the bow on the string should be right there. I mean, it's easy for me to say I got long arms and stuff, but But any amount of bringing that cello to them, and the cello needs to come to the body. You see students kind of twisting around like this, get them to sit straight and let the cello come to them. It's really important that they don't, you know, do all this stuff, even though it's, well, it's typical and it's really common. It's not like there's something wrong with the kids. They do that kind of stuff because they're trying to figure out what's going on here with this huge thing. But the more they play, the more comfortable they should be with this thing just coming to them, kind of being an extension of their body. So that their hands can get where they need to go and it's easy to play. So this part is real important. Let's go, because it's already, Randy, we're gonna have to pick another time. So I'm gonna to do this more, but I'm gonna talk about the left hand some. When they hold the cello like this, they will not be able to see their left hand. Tough, it's just tough luck. But this is the cool thing about it. What I usually say is, listen, you got magic fingers. They are going to find those notes for you. They don't need you looking. Now, I know most of you have tapes on your instruments for your kids. I would like to say, if I came in your classroom, I'd probably just sneak around and pull them all off. But since they're there and you say, you're gonna probably say, well, are your fingers on the tapes and stuff? So if that's the case, they have to pull it out and they go, okay, yes, my finger's on the tapes. Then they put it back. And now they can't see. They cannot see. So what you do is you get them to feel how much space is between their fingers and kind of envision it from the inside and kind of notice whether it's as far apart as they can stretch their fingers or just sort of almost as far apart they can stretch their fingers or almost no stretch at all. However they describe it to themselves, it doesn't matter. As long as they describe it to themselves and how much bend is in my elbow. And notice that, you know, and then they shake it out and then they put it right back up there. And I don't know if any of you were doing that, but then you can check. Ooh, I missed by a half an inch or whatever, right? And then you do it again. You line them up, you put them there, you feel it, you experience it, you notice your elbow bend, and then you put your hand there again. And you just keep doing that, you know, and how many times do you do it? How old are the kids? They can do it that many times, right? If they're 10, they do it 10 times. So that's good. That's a good rule of thumb for any practicing if they practice their age.
Corky, how much angle should there be on the elbow? Should it be just as relaxed as possible? Or
I'm glad you asked, Terry.
okay.
Okay, so I have actually kind of a fun thing that I learned from Mimi's wife. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Mimi, but she's at Indiana. She has this thing that she talks about, I think she calls it, or unless I made this up, I think she calls it elbow flaps. Do you guys know about this? Anybody? No. Okay, so what you do is you say, how high should I have the elbows? Actually, I made up this little story. How high should my elbows be? You go, I don't know. Well, everybody do that. You get your elbows against your body and you go, I don't know, right? Okay, and then you flap your arms over. And that's how high, now you know. So you don't go like this or anything, you just flip them over. It's against your arms, you go, I don't know, and then you just flip them over. And then you bring this one up and that one down. There it is. Or you go, how high for elbows for violists or violinists? You go, I don't know. Go like that, and then you go like this. Isn't that brilliant? It works. I saw when she did that at the workshop, I went, oh my God, I could play the violin. It's like, oh, this is amazing. I always thought with my violin, but you know, so there you go. That's how you know. I don't know. Oh yeah, that's how high. So now when it comes to you know, a deeper explanation for that, what you want is it's high enough so that when your students start to shift, they don't slam into the cello. They can slip right past the cello and then off. You know, that's Suzuki folks, they call this the ski jump. Actually, I just assume them not come all the way off. I'd rather have them go up and come back down and see if they can brush past the shoulder of the cello, but not collide with it. They shouldn't have to go like this and then lift there and then go on up. Okay, so I always call this is the ski jump. This is the tree that they do not want to run into. Okay, and then there's let's see. Then there's the whole thing about you know, I've heard lots of students, teachers complain about squishy fingers and all this kind of stuff. And the kids are going to do that to an extent, yes. But the problem is that their fingers are squishing. They're probably squeezing the bejeebers out of the neck. And this is the worst problem for a left hand on a cellist, is that they're squeezing, okay, to push down those strings. So I use the coat hanger image. If you can picture a coat hanger hanging in the closet. Now, to do this, you have to kind of make the bend. Here's the hook. Here's one arm of the coat thing, and there's the other one is out here, right? I've got a diagram of this so that you can see it. And when a coat hanger hangs in a closet, it just hangs there, right? It just hangs on the rod. And this becomes the cellist's, you know, coat rail or whatever you call it, right? Okay. It's just that we don't want a big bend here. We want this to be basically straight. My picture shows it a little bit depressed here like that. But that's the idea, that you're hanging the weight, but you can't have a coat hanger that will with the arm, the things down, because the shoulders, the coat's just going to end up on the floor. So you need that out so that you can feel the weight going down here. And the one thing that the coat hanger does not have is a clamp underneath. Well, except for those hotel coat hangers. Yeah, no coat hanger needs a clamp. All it needs is gravity, and that's what you're going to use, is arm weight and gravity to push down the strings. And they shouldn't have lots of problems with collapsing fingers that way. So one thing you can do for lining up fingers and getting in the habit, a pencil's a great tool for just getting, you know, if you hold a pencil with your fingers right along the same ridge, then and you put your thumb, just curve your thumb back there, that actually gets the fingers sort of more in a habit of being in curve, because they all have to curve a little differently because they're all different lengths, right? But that actually helps students get used to lining their fingers up so they're not just every which way. So this is a good thing.
And I know you're going to run out of time, but talk about the thumb, because I think it's really hard for them to know what the thumb is supposed to do. You said it's not a clamp, right? But it still feels like I can't get enough weight without some resistance from the back. You know, like I always feel like kids just feel like their thumb has to do something. Their thumb has to be involved in steadying or stabilizing, or just to give me some resistance when I'm.
Well, the answer is no. The answer is no thumb. You don't need your thumb. Now, when you play chords and stuff like that, but that's advanced technique. You don't need the thumb to push down. If there's not enough weight there, it's usually because the elbow's hanging down. So you raise the elbow up until you start feeling the arm weight go into the fingers, and then if they really don't know what to do with the thumb, then I tell them to stroke the back of the neck like they're, you know, like petting a little kitten there, because that's the only relationship they should have with the back of the neck and the thumb, is that they can stroke it nicely, but it's just a nice soft thing. They're not there to strangle the poor neck of the swan or whatever. Right there, that's just to brush and feel how smooth and soft that is. This is where the weight goes, right here, and the thumb just touches. And of course, yes, it touches back. Usually we say back behind the second finger. It's second finger and thumb relationship like we usually use. But one thing I just don't do it, or if you have them on there, don't put those corn pads on the back of the cello neck for where the thumb goes. That's like trouble right from the beginning. So don't use those. It's not good. I wish I could fix all. I wish I could just wave my magic wand. None of these are magic wands, of course. They just things that work, and images and things that should be helpful to you. But of course, the students, especially when they're beginners, they just need constant reminders of these things. And they need each time, you know, if you really want them to get good at this, then you start a lesson with this and see how it's going. Rather than start them all playing and then realize they're all just sort of disasters, you know, go through those steps each time. It's always better to build on the steps, you know, show how good they are with this and good with that and good with that. And then they start putting those things together. So
Corky, this whole workshop started with you coming to me weeks ago and saying, I'd like to help MMSD teachers however I can. So without putting you on the spot, would you be willing to come in someone's Zoom class and look at their cellos or do something with their cellos if they invited you in? Do you have time for that? Are you interested in that kind of
I
connection with
can
our
do
students?
that some mornings. I can do that. So you know, I need to know probably at least a week in advance that I was going to do that, but I'm happy to help. You know, however I can. So you know, and if you have, Heather called me with a question last week, and if anybody's got questions, you know, just yeah, I'll even put that. I'll put my phone number on the handout so you have that and you can be in touch, text me or whatever. And I promise you, my texts and my emails, they do work. My email, you might get blocked out with my spam blocker, but I'll rescue you out of that. So, yeah. So okay.
Cool.
Anyway, I wish I could get to absolutely everything, but we got pretty close. And if we could do another one again like this, and we can review some of this stuff, and I can get to a few other things if you like.
That's great. Thank you so much. This is fantastic.
Okay. All right. No problem.
Guys, I'll send out Corky has to go teach now, but I'll send out her handout with some of the annotations and with her contact information on it as well. And we can talk about a second session to deal more with left-hand stuff.
Sure.
Awesome. Thank you,
Absolutely.
Corky.
Okay. Nice to see you all.
Thank you, Corky.
Okay.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
no problem. You're
Anybody
welcome.
wants to talk for 5 minutes about tuning, stick around.
Oh.